3, 2, 1.
I'd like to start with a story this morning. Once upon a time, a daughter complained to her father that her life was miserable and that she didn't know how she was going to make it. She was tired of fighting and struggling all the time, and it just seemed as one problem was solved, then another soon followed. Now, her father, a chef, said, "Come with me," and took her to the kitchen. He then filled 3 pots with water and placed each of them on a high fire. And once the 3 pots began to boil, he placed potatoes in one pot, eggs in the second pot, and ground coffee beans in the third pot. And he let them sit and boil without saying a word to his daughter. And the daughter was very impatient, was kind of moaning and humping and wondering what the heck was going on. What was he doing? Geez, Dad. And after about 20 minutes, he turned off the burners and he took the potatoes out of the pot and placed them in a bowl. He pulled the boiled eggs out and placed them in a bowl. And then he ladled the coffee out and placed it in a cup. And he turned to her and he asked, "What do you see?" And she hastily replied, "Potatoes, eggs, coffee." "Look closer," he said. "Touch the potatoes." And she did. And she noted that they were soft. And then he asked her to take an egg out of the bowl and crack it. And of course, after it was cracked, she was able to start pulling off the shell. And after that was done, she observed there was a hard-boiled egg, right? And finally, he asked her to sip the coffee. And she did, and its rich aroma brought a smile to her face. Then she looked up and she said, "Father, what does this mean?" And he explained this. The potatoes, the eggs, and the coffee beans had each faced the same adversity, the boiling water. However, each one reacted differently. The potato, it went in strong and hard and unrelenting, but in boiling water, it became soft and weak. The egg was fragile, with this thin outer shell protecting its liquid interior until it was put in the boiling water. Then the inside of the egg became hard. However, the ground coffee beans were the most unique. After they were exposed to the boiling water, they actually changed the water and created something new. And he looked at his daughter and he asked her this: "Which are you? When adversity knocks on your door, how do you respond? Are you a potato, an egg, or a coffee bean?" Each and every one of us has a threshold for what they can handle from the conditions and the opinions and the judgments that are happening and they're hearing and being affected by all around them. And it's based on our perception of who we think we are and how we relate to the universe. When my map of where and how things should be in reality is messed with, and not just physically, this could be something you hear, like I said, an opinion you are buying into or a judgment that upsets you. Well, you could become stressed then, right? Sometimes overwhelmed, right? And that stress may cause you to react and cope in various ways that you or I have learned growing up. Maybe you go on exercise, or maybe you Go off and pray, do your power stance, be creative, talk with friends as a way to cope with that stress that has shown up. Or maybe sometimes, depending on the stressor, you get angry, you get anxious, you overeat, or some other self-abusive practice pops up as your coping mechanism. We have to remember that it is our minds that give permission to do the deed, positive or negative, to do the coping mechanism, positive or negative. And it is only our minds that can rescind the decision or belay that order, as a Navy reference. We have the ability to increase the threshold of any of the stressors that may come in our vicinity, and invite the healthy practices that increase that threshold. We all have a threshold. Even the Dalai Lama has a threshold. But it's time for us to get a clue to what our unconscious internal mental and emotional processes are doing, what we're thinking, the self-talking that is happening, the belief system that we are using and acting from, so that we can create an automatic response using our conscious mind versus the unconscious mind to reveal that divine intelligence and love that is within right now, versus using the junk ideas and the old stories and the other BS of limited or less than thinking that are influences from our past that somehow have gotten into our belief system, gotten into our perspective of how life can be. Now, we're talking about these 9 principles over the next few weeks. And last week we talked about the first principle, and we discussed the art, I guess, of letting whatever happens be okay. And it's not that we don't do anything about it. I want to remind you of that. We don't just turn away and ignore it and, it didn't happen. But it goes back to the idea of what you think of me is none of my business. Or the second of the 4 agreements, to not take anything personally. When you're not attached to the people, situations, and things being other than they are, hoping that they'll be this, that, or the other. And the key word there is hoping. Hoping and wishing doesn't do much for you. But when you're not attached to the opinions and judgments of other people, your happiness and inner peace are independent of the circumstances going around or conditions that are around you. They don't matter. They may affect you for a second or two so that you can consciously go, well, what you think of me is none of my business. Or I'm not taking this personally. I'll do whatever needs to be done in the moment to answer that idea. But I'm going to respond, not react from old stories, from fear or anxiety or anything like that. When your personal experience, no matter what is happening around you, comes from inside opinions and perspectives rather than being under the control of outside events or my reaction to them, then we can consciously choose to be happy and at ease even when the world is not acting the way we've decided it should at all times. Now, we all have a threshold. I have a threshold. You have a threshold to how much we can be detached from the actions of others. And most would say that this threshold comes from unresolved childhood trauma and that leftover emotional junk that's buried in the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind, which causes these triggers and these reactions. You could say the shadow self, even, that needs to be healed. That's where this comes from. That's where these reactions come from. I was talking last week about one that happened to me. You can go to all the therapists, personal development seminars, read every self-help book ever written, continue to show up here every Sunday or whichever day or time that you decide to watch our celebration, but without working the tools, without using the tools, without getting up every morning and maybe throughout the day and right before you go to sleep, using the affirmative incantations or other spiritual practices, you won't heal. You got to work the tools. If you don't work the tools, you could just easily flow back onto this wheel, this whirling dervish of dysfunction the next time something shows up and hits your low threshold. The next time your low threshold is pushed. And it will be. It will be. Now, I'm not talking about fault here, okay? Don't step into this when it's my fault. Don't stop the whole blame, shame, guilt thing about your triggers. They're there. They happened. What are we going to do now? What are we going to do now? Now, maybe it's going to start in an intellectual exercise, and that's okay. You got to get it. You got to understand it. But then we got to use the tools. You see, what happens when we react, when a stressor shows up, overwhelms us maybe to make us react, what happens is there's this deluge of chemical reactions happening in our brain and our body, actually, that flow, these chemical reactions, these hormones start flowing, and it becomes an assault from within. It's a wiring in our brain that causes the excited chemicals to show up, or the too few calming ones, hormones, to show up, and then we react inappropriately. It's like the whole spilled milk thing. Spilled milk on the floor doesn't equal a screaming match. But when our threshold is pressed, our biological thermostat may spill open and we react instead of respond. Now, when that happens, and it's like I said, it's happened to me, of course you want to apologize to somebody that a trigger made you yell at them, et cetera, but you also may want to get into some deep self-forgiveness work. Self-forgiveness for that past. Don't worry so much about forgiving the people that did stuff at you. Forgive yourself is more important than forgiving them. But you also want to understand things. You want to reframe. That's what we're doing. We're reframing what's going on, no matter what's going on. Listen to this great quote. I have missed more than 9,000 shots in my career, this person said. I have lost almost 300 games. On 26 occasions, I have been entrusted to take the game-winning shot, and I missed. I have failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. Michael Jordan said that. One of our greatest basketball players of all time. I have lost almost 300 games, he said. Is that possible? He's been entrusted to take the game-winning shot, and he missed at least 26 times, at least at the time that he said that. He fails, and he fails, and he fails, and I put fails in quote, but he learns. He reframes that failure into what has made him be one of the, if not the most successful person in his field. Jordan reframed the stressors of defeat. Now, again, I do not want to dismiss the stressors. I want you to remember who you are, and the power behind you is greater than any other, but you have to do the work. I have to do the work too. Don't think I don't have to do the work in some situations. I have to declare the healing process happening now, and I have to do the work that makes the healing process occur. Now, of course, like I was saying before, some say these stressors are learned from childhood, and that some people believe that the rewiring of the brain from these childhood stressors or traumas are permanent. But that's not true. Don't let anybody tell you that those things are permanent. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the plasticity of the brain is one of the greatest discoveries in the last several decades. It allows us to retune the neurochemical systems in our brain. Now, sometimes we may need medication to assist us for a short time or for a not so short time, but they're not the end all. And they're not the be all. They're an assist like any other tool. And we don't really want to take those without a brain scan either. Now, I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not giving you medical advice, but I have heard one of the most preeminent psychiatrists, Daniel G. Amen, say so about doctors who prescribe these brain chemistry medications without taking brain scans, with just dealing with symptoms. But anyway, medication therapy of any kind will not help you surpass your threshold without spirituality of some kind. And you can call it what you want. You don't have to call it spirituality. Who cares? Mindfulness activity. Again, another word, a big buzzword, especially in the last decade. But if you don't like that word, mindfulness, make up some other word. Who cares? We're not talking about religion. We're not even talking about God. We're talking about the creative energy of the universe that is working through you, with you, as you, for you. It's this creative energy that created everything. The Big Bang, you believe in the Big Bang? It's the Big Bang energy. That is still happening right here, right now. And you engage that along with any therapies that you might use, any psychological therapies or energy therapies that you may use. I want to remind you, I am not anti-therapy, whether it's talk, behavioral, cognitive, humanistic, somatic, integrative, spiritual, Alderian, what other kind of therapies are there? Art, music, Gestalt, hypnotherapy, Gottman, energetic, whatever. Any of those therapies you want to use to assist you to getting centered and grounded, along with your spiritual practice, have at it. But use the tools. Take the tools and enlighten yourself and expand your awareness of who you are and how you respond to things. The only thing that makes anything we discuss, discover, or inspire here is that we all go beyond the nodding intellectual acceptance of the principles. Yes, okay, I believe that. I like when you talk about that stuff. It reminds me, and I'm great and grateful that happens for you, that I can be of service that way. But I must sometimes too, integrate, be these principles at an everyday, deep and experiential level. We have to expand our conscious awareness and awaken to working it and enjoying that, enjoying the workingness. Michael Jordan doesn't like missing, especially at an integral time of a game, getting that ball in the hoop. And he says in the quote 26 times in a huge career is really not that bad. But I bet you each of those 26 times there was at least at first a reaction, and then probably very quickly with after that a response The response is, let me recreate this. Let me mentor myself or find a mentor that shows me whatever in my hand movements, in what my body is doing to get that sucker into that net. Meditation and prayer, affirmative incantations that I write or that are in my book, and imagination feeling work, all those things can condition you to allow this light, this illumination from the universe shine on the shadows that are within you. Shine a light on them. Oh, there they are. There they are. I see it now. I've turned on the light. I see you, baby. I see you, and I know you don't belong here anymore. Thank you for being here, but you don't belong here anymore. They can awaken the highest within you, the spiritual practice. They can, moment by moment, inch by inch, condition you to have the courage, the strength, the oomph to declare your healing. You got to declare your healing. We have to stand here, we have to take a moment, and we have to declare, I am going to heal whatever it is. The childhood trauma, the belief in your lack or limitation. All these spiritual practices, including your therapies, keep you on a path. And when you remember who you are, that puts a foundation that keeps you on that path. That path is not just mud, but there is ground under it. All of this works together to stimulate change, upgrade, and make you raise your threshold. The spiritual practices, the neuroscience principles, the therapies, the psychological therapies, and the energy therapies make the dysfunctional thoughts dissipate and eventually become ineffective. Ineffective. You're not affected when somebody has some stupid opinion or judgment about you because you know who you are. You may not like it, but you don't react to it. You respond by remembering who you are. You won't need to cope because the system can no longer be stressed by that kind of judgment, opinion, condition. You become centered, you become grounded, you become calm. All that prevails. Maybe not at the first second, but at the third, fourth, or fifth second. And because of that, happiness and peacefulness prevail in your consciousness. We are attacking the condition at its root, not the symptom. And we're bypassing the mere treatment of symptoms, and systems, but symptoms is what I meant to say. How? How do we do this? Well, by continuing to do your daily spiritual practice or upping it. Sometimes I have to up mine, baby. And by recognizing that you are in this process of awakening to the truth of who you are. It's a process, it's a journey, it's an adventure. And the fact that the uncomfortable emotions that might be surrounding this overwhelm, this chaos, even the reorganization of your brain circuitry, when it starts to occur, will be diminished and eventually fall away. That all of this work is a prelude to powerful, positive changes and should not be resisted. Don't resist just because it may be painful for a second or two. Mindfulness practices are the glue that makes any sort of therapy that you use work. Any of that therapy work will only work when you add mindfulness practices. Now, I've mentioned a few, and there are many others. And one of them can just be the declaration of this is going to work. This is going to help me. This is going to assist me. And my life is improving starting right now. And it makes me live like the coffee bean, where we will change the water itself. Resistance is futile. Assistance, using affirmations, meditations, imaginations, visualizations, declarations, that's what's going to make change in your world. That is what's going to make healing in your mind and body. By taking hold of your spiritual practice, you shall surpass your threshold and make way for healing, happiness, peace, and grace. And I know each and every one of you has the ability and the backing to do that. I assure you, you work. Thank you so much. Namaste.